Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
National interest this week is back to full-on politics, but we approach politics through sociology a little bit. So let me start it with a question. Which side of the debate are you on over the online mocking of the new Union Health Minister, Mansukh Mandaviya's proficiency in English? You may have noticed he's been mocked a great deal by people who've fished out his earlier tweets which are written in less than perfect English. But before I go there, let me also remind you that this is the week when we start our YouTube membership plan. So please hit the join button, become a member of our YouTube community, and there will be many benefits which you will read once you hit that join button. So hit the join button and I get back to the business of explaining this week's national interest argument to you, and let's see whether you agree or don't agree. Maybe you will say I'm indulging in pop sociology and arriving at a sort of hasty political conclusions, and maybe you will agree with me. But the whole beauty of political discourse and political debate is that people agree and people disagree, but we provoke a debate. So let's see. Now, one side thinks there are two sides to this debate. Some think that maybe it was good to mock him because after all a minister has to have proficiency in English language, which is international language. The other side objects to these attacks as ridiculous, unfair and pompous. For early disclosure, I am on this side because sometimes it's best not to leave these things to surprise in the end. So I am on this side. I believe that these attacks are ridiculous, unfair and pompous. It brings back to me the famous and now forgotten words that Raj Narayan, the famous lifelong socialist, spoke when visiting London as India's health minister. He was health minister in the Morarji Desai government that came into being in 1977 to 1980, short-lived first Janata government. He was health minister in that government, and he had his Rastafarian looks and a very rustic style. In many ways, he was the original Lalu Yadav. It's just that there was no TV those days. He was the original Lalu Yadav. So he had gone to London as India's health minister, and some journalist asked him, when a minister goes, journalists are called, that how do you manage the health ministry without knowing any English? So he answered without batting an eyelid. He said, हम सब जानते हैं English. Milton, Hilton सब पढ़े हैं. Now at that point it became something that people laughed at, but the fact is that he was just being rustic. He was just being Lalu Yadav in the late 70s. The fact is he wasn't illiterate. He was actually educated. He had been a student union leader at the age of 17 in 1934. He joined the Congress party and became a freedom fighter. I told you, student leader. Later he worked with Lohiya. He was on the board of his newspaper Jan. He also brought out his own newspaper from Varanasi called Janmukh, except those were in Hindi, those were not in English. At the same time, while he may not have been so hot with English, it did not stop him from defeating Indira Gandhi not once but twice. And why do I say twice? Because first time, while she may have won the election, Raj Narayan won his election petition in Allahabad High Court. That led to, that panicked Mrs. Gandhi into imposing the emergency. And once the emergency was lifted and Raj Narayan came out of Mrs. Gandhi's jail, he contested against her in Rai Bareli and defeated her. So he defeated Indira Gandhi twice. The other side, so I am on the side that says whether you know English or not, it doesn't hurt to know English, but whether you know it or not doesn't matter in terms of your public life. The other side, on the other hand, sees in Mandaviya's old tweets in far from perfect English as uproariously funny, and also not just funny, that you can laugh, it's funny, but how can it be funny? He's the health minister of India and India is going through a pandemic. How can somebody who knows no English or who writes such silly English be trusted with India's health ministry? Now the fact is, the health minister of India does not have to read scientific papers. He doesn't even have to read English newspapers, and anything that has to be read in English, the literature that comes from overseas or whatever, or scientific research, He's got his civil services and he's got the scientific establishment to do that for you, because a politician, as I keep on saying, knowing English doesn't hurt, but it doesn't mean that if the BJP appoints a man like Mansukh Mandaviya as health minister, also concurrently chemicals and fertilizers minister, it doesn't demonstrate BJP's talent deficit or couldn't care less arrogance, nor does it remind India's voters of the blunder they made in voting for the BJP. That is what those on the side of the debate that says that a minister should be held accountable or made fun of for his bad English believes. That is the message. The reason I am on the other side, as I believe most Indians would be, is that to conflate the knowledge of English with being educated, literate, intelligent or having intellect is wrong and supercilious. English doesn't hurt, but what a minister or anybody in public life needs is political instinct, intelligence, ability to learn and the aura to build confidence in their team. Now let's look at some examples. Today nobody remembers K. Kamraj for the fact that he was nearly illiterate, that he had to drop out of school at the age of 11 because of extreme poverty and because his father died then, and to help his mother fend for the family. Yet he grew into the most powerful president of a national political party, unless Amit Shah came along later 2013-14. Kamraj had commanded more power as Congress president than any non-Gandhi ever did after the independence, for sure. He came up with the Kamraj plan. He did many other things. He didn't know any English, but he knew his Tamil. Importantly, he also knew the poor. So he also rolled out a lot of anti-poverty programs in Tamil Nadu, the result of which we are still seeing, the benefit of which is still being reaped. Again, we get into elitism. How does this elitism works? A deep-set social elitism that cuts across trades, professions, everything. So when Manohar Parrikar, the former defense minister, late Manohar Parrikar, he first began appearing in public in chappals, bush shirt, hanging loose outside, even at very stiff and formal military ceremonies. People said, how undignified to have a defense minister like that. But most people didn't remember that two of India's two most successful defense ministers, that is Y.B. Chavan and Jagjeevan Ram, under whom India won 2 wars. And Y.B. Chavan particularly rebuilt India's armed forces. He launched India's first defense modernization 5-year plan after the China debacle. There was nothing in their demeanor that was military-like, demeanor or disposition. But we in India don't like to know our own political history. We cannot understate the importance of knowing English though. I'm not saying don't know English, I'm speaking to you in English. We cannot understand the importance of knowing English. In India, it is the language of empowerment. That is why the Lohiites were wrong in packaging their opposition to social elitism as their rejection of English. Mulayam Singh Yadav, as Chief Minister of UP, continued with this, but his son quietly made a departure, although he himself always speaks only in Hindi. Even on an English channel, he will speak in Hindi. That is something that you will now find that Arvind Kejriwal also does. Arvind Kejriwal has been to an IIT, he cracked UPSC, he joined Indian Revenue Service, but you will almost never find him speaking in English, always Hindi, and fairly simple, almost rustic, gharelu kind of Hindi that people of the middle classes, lower middle classes, working classes will use in their normal lives. So these are smart politicians who know what's working. Similarly now, just as I say Lohiites were unwise in what they did, their opposition to English, now you see people like Yogi Adityanath, 2 chief ministers, then Y.S. Jagan Mohan Reddy in Andhra. These two are pushing English medium in their school. So this is a prudent thing that they are doing. That's why I say that there is no need to undermine the need to understand or to learn English language. What is wrong is to mock people who are not so proficient in the language as illiterate or as gawar. Gawar is rustic. So we Indians have also adopted English to our own ways of speaking. In every part of India, we use and speak English differently. So I quote a story from former US Assistant Secretary of State for South Asia, Robin Raffel, who once said to me, and that's a story she told people often, that how once Pranab Mukherjee came to Washington in Narasimha Rao's time and had some meetings, and somebody called her from one of the groups that attended those meetings to try and understand what Pranab Mukherjee was saying, and she explained it, and she said that this person told her, hey Robin, these Indians of yours, they speak 16 dialects of English language, which is true. In different parts of India, we speak English differently. In different parts of India, we also write and understand and interpret English differently. I'll give you some examples from my own experience. When I travel across the country, including during the elections, I try to pick up nuances of how English is used. The first time I went to the Northeast in January 1981 as the correspondent of the Indian Express, a lot of the wise people that I had been advised to meet by my editors then, Arun Shourie and Kuldeep Nayyar and Ajit Bhattacharjee at the Express, a lot of the people I went to would say, "Arey, don't trust so and so, he's a bloody troubleshooter." And I would think, troubleshooter, I even checked the dictionary. I thought troubleshooter is a nice guy. But then I realized that in the Brahmaputra Valley, troubleshooter is the same as a troublemaker. Similarly, in Bengal, you ask somebody, where is so-and-so gone? So-and-so has gone marketing. Now so-and-so has not gone marketing, so-and-so has gone shopping. So shopping is used as marketing. In Punjab, in our sort of native region, Punjab, Haryana, you go to small town Punjab, Haryana, maybe it's a bit less now, but when I was growing up as a journalist, it was almost something that you found everywhere. If you try to say that I am an editor, nobody would be impressed unless a realization came into their heads and their faces lit up with some satisfaction. They said, oh, acha, auditor. So English language is also used in different ways across our country. This is not our mother tongue. In Punjab, in fact, we also endured jokes like King's English or Singh's English. In fact, this was the headline of a middle article that Prem Bhatia, the legendary editor of the Tribune, wrote, one of the middle articles in the Tribune in the late 70s. Again, this is not to say use bad English. That bad English is good. It helps to be correct and intelligible. That's most important. But it doesn't mean that you are a good for nothing if you can't. Also, what is perfect or correct English can be defined in 100 ways depending on where you come from and where you learnt it. You could be near perfect if, to borrow that line from matrimonial ads for brides in Delhi's newspapers, if you are convented, or better still, a Tharoorian. But remember, only a Shashi Tharoor can get away with speaking like Shashi Tharoor. If you and I try to do that, everybody will laugh at us, including our children, and maybe dogs will chase us on the streets because we will not sound like ourselves. Each one of us is entitled to sound like ourselves. Now, not everybody learnt English early in school. Most Indians did not. How you relate to the language also depends on how you learnt it. I spent almost all my early schooling years in a system where the teaching of English alphabet began in class 6, and then there was some speed learning tricks like the convenient and fun doggerels that teachers would confect to teach you some vocabulary and also to keep you interested, because these are large classes, usually under trees in the open, you sat on rugs or whatever. And I will give you a sample from those doggerels. So one went like, pigeon kabutar udan fly. So pigeon means kabutar, udan fly, it flies. Look dekho asman sky, sky sakai, in native accent. Beti daughter pani water jai hind namaste hello hi. So it went on like that. See how much more fun is this and how much more friendly this is than a boring primer that begins by presuming you are illiterate in that language. We learnt English from newspapers, radio bulletins, and most importantly, cricket commentary, and improved over time. We, the Hindi medium types, or HMTs as I call us, never became perfect in the language, either spoken or written. I still am not. But we got by as India changed, because India's expectations of a perfect convented knowledge of English language shifted. This is the month of the 30th anniversary of economic reforms. Critics on the left attack reforms for unleashing a new wave of elitism in India. But they are wrong. Most of them are in fact children of the entitled old elites who got greatly outnumbered, outranked, and cruelly outfamed by the new generations of HMT Indians that got empowered by the economic boom, and a new, much larger Indian elite was created. Some of us are members of that, I confess to that. Suddenly, there were so many companies, including the media, there were so many employers, and the need for skilled workers exploded because the economy grew because of the reform. There was no way the Doon schools, the St. Stephen's colleges, Oxford, Cambridge, the entire Ivy League could fulfill this need. So employers had to sort of stoop backwards and find talent wherever it was available. Suddenly it wasn't so important who your daddy was, whether your college held jam sessions, or whether you even knew what a jam session is, or which club your family was members of. This change spread across the board, from corporate C-suites to startups, civil services, and that last fortress of Anglophile elitism, the armed forces. Everything changed, and you can see this change all around yourselves. At which point I might be reminded, in fact, by you to step back from sociological digression and come back to my home turf, which is politics, and what the Mandaviya controversy teaches us about it. Also, where I've been flawed so far, I have to admit, I've been flawed so far in my own understanding and analysis of the Modi phenomenon. For some time now, I have maintained that his political proposition has three key elements. It rests on three pillars, a three-legged stool. A new, redefined Hinduized nationalism, that's one. Two, image of an anti-corruption warrior, crusader, whatever you call it. And three, efficient delivery of welfare to the poorest. I had overlooked another key factor. All these are correct, but I was flawed in my analysis in overlooking another key factor, that is anti-elitism. Over the decades, a popular revolt has built up against English-speaking elites in India, and this nicely dovetails into the other three elements of Modi's political proposition. Our school textbooks, for example, mentioned with pride the riches that Nehru was brought up in. It doesn't impress anybody now, but the chai wala story works at this point. Modi is seen as the perfect antithesis of what the Congress leaders have been, and particularly their children, their offspring. He is seen as a Desi versus westernized elites. When he attacks the Lutyens or the Khan Market gang, it is a code for the upper crust, which he tells his voters has been in power for far too long and undeservedly so. I'm putting these in single quotes because this is this message that, you know, look at these people, this Khan Market gang, Lutyens, Delhi, they've been ruling, they've been in power for too long, controlling everything, and undeservedly so. I have come, you voted me to come and break their control over this power structure. That's why when you mock him for spelling strength incorrectly, you remember that? S-T-R-E-A-N-H. You can mock him for spelling it wrongly, or that is when you mock him for spelling strength as S-T-R-E-A-N-H, that is wrongly, or Mansukh Mandaviya for calling Mahatma Gandhi nation of the father in a tweet. You make his point to his voters. That's the reason to the Modi proposition also add anti-elitism, and for anybody who wants to challenge him will have to find an answer to that point as well.